there are those people who believe in everything and they succumb to this mass hysteria that's going on. And I know this is something that you wanted to touch upon as well. So could you please elaborate on that part?
I'm sorry, what's the question exactly?
Regarding mass hysteria that's going on in Belgium, for example, or in Europe regarding this conflict.
Yes, the mass hysteria, in my definition, is, for example, this military intervention in Ukraine, like some surgical war. It was meant to be like something like Iraq 2003, something like that, yeah? But it doesn't work out like that. It's because Ukraine resists more than they anticipated. But anyway, the context, the mass hysteria is what makes people who have the intellect to find out that it's all a misrepresentation, but they on purpose encourage each other to ignore it, and they eventually believe what they collectively are asked to believe by their government. So there is a gap between the intellect of the people who believe this and share all these things without thinking about what they're saying. And if you start to question them, why do you support a country who glorifies the Nazi Germany, Nazism, that Bandera guy who killed 50,000 Poles during World War II, and then they make the face drop. If you talk with them live, they will make the face drop like this. It's like there is some kind of autism that's triggered, and it kills conversation. And usually I won't hear from these people again. Well, because I bother the illusion.
It's sad.
But they have the intellect. They have the intellect. In 1 hour, they can, if they were honest with themselves, in 20 minutes, they can, oh, okay, oh, wow. Russia was back in the corner. Russia was provoked to make this war, this invasion. But they don't do that because they do the face drop and punish.
It's unfortunate that when you present people facts, they completely ignore them, or they have nothing to say, and they rely on what propaganda was telling them, their own, about here it's a dictatorship, etc., etc. But even the Pope recently, he mentioned that it was most likely it was NATO provoking Russia into actually doing this. Now, some people may say, okay, well, it's a war. Some people call it a military operation. In Russia, it's called a military operation. There's a reason why, is that by our definition, a war is when your whole country actually mobilizes and works for that particular war effort. There's been no mobilization here. And in fact, a small percentage of the armed forces are out there in this military operation. On my channel, I call it a war primarily because no one on YouTube is going to look up military operation. They're going to look up war in Ukraine, and this is the only way, or one of the best ways to get this information out there. But I mean, when you present facts like streets in Ukraine were renamed to honor Bandera, a Nazi collaborator, to honor Shukhevich, a Nazi collaborator, and he wore their uniform and he murdered he murdered thousands of people, hundreds of thousands. It's completely ignored entirely. I mean, there's so much evidence out there that shows exactly what's been happening, and it is entirely ignored.
Yeah, because this clique of liberals, they have this very narrow view that if you see something slightly disturbing, you're gonna get scandal. But if you something totally over the top, like supporting Nazi government, this totally ignores, it's like out of the field of view. They don't ever see it, and they just go with the flow of mass hysteria.
But at the same time, why, in your opinion, is that first of all, NATO and the US have engaged in many conflicts around the world. They've started them. They've destroyed many countries in the Middle East, Yugoslavia as well, in Northern Africa. I mean, why do you think this double standard is allowed? Why is this hypocrisy so, at the same time, it's so evident, it's so out there, but at the same time, people seem to entirely ignore it?
It's because the sense of loyalty supersedes all intellect process in the West. For example, also off topic, but good example. When I was a kid, the US bombed some factory in Libya
Mm-hmm.
that was supposed to have chemical fabrication in it. And I was like 10 years old, and I heard in the playing ground guy from my third grade class, forgot fifth grade. When I grow up, I want to be Reagan so I can kill Gaddafi. This is the kind of things you hear in 1980s. When was that? 87, 86, no, 85. I forgot when it happened. So already back then is this culture. And when there was the actual Libyan war, I was still under the mass hysteria. So I was enthusiastic at first, and then when I saw the result, I shook out of it, and I realized that it was a criminal aggression and it totally destroyed the country. Because even though, for example, I hated Gaddafi for many years because of Lockerbie, but then when you saw the Libyan wars, see so many clans in Libya, there is zero evidence that Gaddafi ordered this terrorist attack. There was some clan in the secret services in Libya at the time, with no evidence it was him. Zero. So, and I was kind of disgusted with myself after I saw how Gaddafi was finally killed. That I was enthusiastic with this at first, and then I realized it was just a horrendous crime, especially how Gaddafi was killed, because the French jets, they purposely bombed not Gaddafi's vehicle. They bombed in front, so all the rebels could find him alive and kill him there and then, and torture. It was horrible.
You know, you've said something that provoked a thought in my head. You mentioned when you first heard about it when you were a kid, you were enthusiastic. Now, I cannot speak for every Russian, but enthusiasm isn't a word we would use about war or any kind of conflict, because the immense amount of suffering that our country has endured in the 20th century, the different wars, the different invasions, even the 14, I believe it was 14 countries that invaded us after we had the communist revolution. And I'm not a communist, by the way, but I'm just saying after we had it, we still had 14 other countries invade us. And the US actually invaded us as well. I mean, this is not enthusiasm isn't a word that we would use, but do you think that people in Europe are enthusiastic about interventions in military conflicts, at least at first?
When it's their interest, there is the dichotomy between pacifists who don't want to be any blood and resolve this, and there are all these other extreme, which is let's go, and because they watch stream movies, anything worse, a video game, basically. And in between, there was the piece. In between these two extremes, this is a full spectrum of people and opinions, but who usually remain silent because they let others do the shouting and they don't want to get entangled in being bothered in their comfort of daily lives.
I mean, so if anyone is excited about going to war or enthusiastic, I suggest that they play a little bit of paintball or airsoft and see how fast they cease to exist on the battlefield. There's absolutely it's exciting to play paintball and airsoft, but when you realize when you realize what would happen to you and your friends and their families should this actually occur, then in my opinion, all excitement and enthusiasm goes out the window.
Germany already rolled over about buying gas. So they don't take cold showers.
But regarding the current atmosphere of disinformation, for example, like I'm not gonna name the city just because it's YouTube and something might happen, but when there was that supposed massacre by Russian forces in a city that starts with a B, that's still northwest of Kiev.
Yeah, I've seen your video. I shared it.
Thank you. And then it was deleted by YouTube. The one on the Russian channel was I got a warning, and I realized that one particular part was what caused it. So I quickly removed it from the English channel, that part, and it's still up there. But did you see how there was no investigation, and now no one even says a thing about it? Nothing. It's completely gone, except for when the German minister recently visited that place. But it's completely gone out of the information sphere. Like, that was an information BOMB that sort of fell, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then more weapons, more ammo, more military aid to Ukraine. That was the result. No more, talks to try and make peace. Now it's just fighting till the last
Because
Ukrainian.
it leaked. Because it leaked, it's a fake. Even in English media, they admitted it's a fake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the BBC just came out and said it's not real.
Oh, I
Because they couldn't. It was so big they couldn't ignore it. I mean, even for mass hysteric people, it was insulting their intelligence. So it's like the mass hysteria just said, "Oh, time out. We want for something so stupid. Can you just pretend to ignore it didn't happen?" And that allows mass hysteria to continue on and hiding the smaller things.
Okay. Something that is maybe a little bit off topic. Something that was a conversation that maybe a question that I didn't have planned. I didn't plan at all. But where do you see this conflict going? And in your opinion, obviously, and what do you think would be the best course of action for people in Europe and people in Russia to actually be friends again? Call it that.
Well, the West needs to stop giving weapons to Ukraine, for starters, because it only prolongs the suffering of the people who are caught in between. And you already said something like that, I think.
It's a hard question, I know.
What does the West need to do to stop this war? Yes.
Well, how do you think this particular conflict can end? Like, what are the scenarios, and maybe what's the way to move forward? How can Russia and people in Europe go past this and actually become normal trading partners once again?
Well, we need to wait until winter when they start to buy gas again, all of them. Because they start dying of cold, they will suddenly ignore sanctions. And there needs to be restored economic cooperation, and there needs to be some kind of peace talk where everybody at least has the impression to be involved and have some kind of stabilization about the situation. I think that there is not going to be a march on Kiev because everybody knows it would be a massacre, people living there. So I think nobody wants a battle in Kiev at this point. But it will. I think Ukraine will end up be divided under peacekeeping forces on both sides, a little bit like West and East Germany in the time at some point. And that at some point the economic disaster will be so untenable for the people who started sanctions that will be forced to be negotiating and stop sending weapons that get destroyed the next 20 minutes get off the train. They don't even get off the train anymore because they destroyed the discharging stations. Yeah, so
Well,
when it hurts the money is when the war will stop being when the money is too. When it hurts with the money is when Europe will stop supporting Ukraine.
And that's extremely unfortunate that it actually comes down to money when we're talking about lives of Ukrainians and Russians who are living in the conflict zone. But you live in Russia. There was a massive celebration in many cities in Russia on the 9th of May and in St. Petersburg as well. Did you manage to see the celebrations that were happening in Melitopol and Kherson and in cities that are in Ukraine but are under Russian control, where people finally, after 8 long years, have been able to march with holding, and again, I'm not a communist. I'm not trying to get the Soviet Union back at all. But they were marching with the flags of victory and the flags that were not allowed to march with under Ukraine. Did you manage to see any of those videos?
Well, I'm in 30 plus groups for news in Telegram, so
Okay.
I've seen some pictures, but I didn't read in-depth analysis. But I've seen that yes, it's very popular. They could finally get. I have one copy myself. I received in Donetsk. Yeah, it's but the most poignant video was in this babushka came out with that flag, and this Ukrainian soldier stepped on it and gives her food and berits, and that made a buzz. I think that was more important than because of course people are gonna get out and celebrate. And in St. Petersburg, they just canceled the flyby, but otherwise there was some parades going on. People in the streets, in 9 May I was in the street, they were lighthearted, they have good morale, they don't think, they're not intimidated at all to get out in the street. There was masses of people, on Nevsky Prospect, there was masses of people can be removed, like in the metro, and waiting for, but I was more on the Vaska side, Vasilski Ostrov, because it's more my favorite place. But people are not afraid to go in the streets and celebrate in St. Petersburg, at least.
Well, let's well, we have one more topic to actually cover before we move on to something a little bit lighter. But you know, we talk a lot about disinformation. We've spoken a lot about how there's mass hysteria and everything. But while, and these are your words, while Belgium is under the military occupation, as you mentioned when we spoke earlier, by the American forces. I mean, can you speak a little bit about that occupation, and do you ever think that this kind of disinformation is ever going to stop whilst you're under this occupation?
No, it's not going to stop, and it's not going to be called an occupation either. I made a statement on my website where I define what's American parasitism and occupation. In short, my country, a small country, Belgium, 11 million people, has 3 American bases on it, military bases, one of which is a logistic airport. And the most beautiful palace of the 1800s near one of these bases, they gave to an American general with all these cliques of bodyguard to guard it. So it's like we're in a colony. It's not just the basis, it's also that at every level of Belgian politics, we are like puppy dog of American foreign politics. Actually, it's not direct. It's more like we are puppy dogs of foreign policy of France, which is totally a puppy dog of American foreign policy. So it's like a ricochet thingy. And for example, when there was a war in Syria, new prime minister, I knew him very well. I was in his party at the time. And he went to UN and said, in Syria, we have 2 enemies, IGIL and Bashar al-Assad. Face pumped, and I knew that moment I can never go in politics with that party again. A new prime minister, he's my age, the same age as me. And this kind of stupidity, like, it goes a long way to get people to stop thinking. Because it's said by an official, it's like argument of authority. And if he says that, he must be right. And I will stop thinking. And that's the process going in millions of people. And when I say to somebody, when I mention to somebody that the American occupier in our country did this, did that, they think I'm joking or trolling, but I'm serious. And they don't realize it. And as long as they don't realize, because they say, the US is our allies. They are all allies. They helped us during World War II. Yeah, sure. There are some cemeteries of World War II in Belgium. They are classified. You can never touch them. And I will always respect and support that they are classified and you can never touch them. But that was a different era. Now they are exploiting us like a colony. And because of American nuclear weapons stored in Belgium, I think it was 3 years ago, that there was an article that President Putin activated the dead foot. You know what's dead foot thing? It's like if everybody on the nuclear retaliation stations die, they lift the foot on the pedal, and they will bomb not just the US, but also the European countries that have nuclear weapons in them, American. And because of the American occupier, my country is in target of that program. That if the US, if Biden presses the red button and wants to call the nurse, but he press the nuke button, like in that cliche, then because of American occupation, my country is under threat of retaliation in case of nuclear war. And how can you say Belgium is not occupied when it's hosting nuclear weapons who are responsible for being putting our country on a target list of retaliations of Russia? I mean, it's pure logic. but pure logic hurts hysteria, so it's just ignored.
It is unfortunate that I mean, this current conflict, and Putin did come out and he said, listen, NATO in Ukraine is a red line for us. We need to get to the negotiating table. This was in December of last year. It was entirely ignored completely. They tried to do some negotiations, and that was completely out of the question. Russia wanted guarantees on paper that NATO wasn't going to expand further, and those guarantees were not given. So it's unfortunate that some countries, for example, Finland, we have a huge border with them. They've been neutral for a very long time, and they started debating joining NATO when that's what caused us to have a conflict with Ukraine in the first place. And staying out of that alliance would actually be safer than being in it. I don't see the logic of some people who want to do that.
They had this speech because of internal European pressure, but in the end they will just build some wall and not join NATO. They're not stupid. They're just putting a show for European partners.
Okay.
I don't think Finland Finland. I have many friends in Finland because I go to Finland sometimes, and they're very smart people. They put on the show because they had pressure, but it's gonna further and fall at some point. I mean, just put a wall for show, but they're not silly. I mean,
Well, I hope that there are many more intelligent people in Finland than they are the opposite. Unfortunately, one of my good friends who I went to university with, he's from Finland, and at the beginning of this, he somebody who was very, very intelligent, who was very successful in business, and the things that he was saying and sending to me, it felt like I was speaking with a robot again. I was just shocked, to be quite honest with you. So hopefully, maybe sooner or later, he will realize that this conflict is a lot more complicated than what one side or the other side is saying. But we've spoken quite a bit about this particular conflict. I wanted to end this interview or this conversation on a much more lighter note. And in this case, I mean, you've been living in Russia. Apart from this conflict, what did you enjoy about living here? Which kind of cities did you visit? Like, could you please describe your experience here so far?
well, I live in St. Petersburg, and it's like my turf. Like for me, it's a harmonic city to live in because I'm an artist, and it's a city for artists in all levels. I've been in Moscow quite a few times, but for me, Moscow, I always joke that it's a big business center. So I like to visit Moscow, but I wouldn't like to live in Moscow because this is more the vibe for economic people, and St. Petersburg is more the vibe for artistic people. Otherwise, I've been in several cities in Karelia, I've been in South, I've been in Nizhny Novgorod, but I haven't been in the Far East just yet, but maybe later happens. So I really like to live in St. Petersburg, and also I like that Russian people are more authentic and more. I connect more with people in St. Petersburg than in my own country. I connect better. Communication is more natural, and it's more healthy for mental health to live in St. Petersburg than to live in what Belgium has become. And I won't expand on that because you asked me to keep it clean.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are many people now. I see in the groups people who are fans of Russia. They dream now to live in Russia because they're so sick of living in France, Belgium, all these countries, because they see what's going on, the corruption and the stupidity in the media, and they say, but it's a little bit late now because now it's getting more difficult for these people to get the visa in the first place. And they didn't learn the language. When I came to Russia, I learned the language already 2 years, so I had a head start. But if you come here and don't speak Russian, you can't do anything. You can't even file papers for resident permits. You can't do anything because services don't speak English for you. You have to adapt before. And so if I need advice, somebody wants to come to Russia, you start learning the language today. And when you have the opportunity, you go. But if you go, don't speak Russian, nothing's gonna work.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you have a drone, so you're a drone pilot. I have a drone as well. DJI
I had a
Mini.
drone.
Oh, you had a drone. Okay, because I was gonna
But
say.
I had a drone that my drone that I had in Russia, it crashed because the commands stopped working. But I had another drone that was in Belgium, but when I came back to Russia, I didn't bring it to me. So I still know how to fly drones, but I don't have a drone right now. But go ahead, what you were saying about
No,
drones?
what I was going to say is that there are some extremely beautiful cities, golden ring cities, the golden ring, and I've been to some of them, like Suzdal, for example, and I have a video where I was doing a lot of drone shots, and it's incredibly beautiful. I'm hoping to visit some more of them this summer, but I highly recommend, if you do like aerial, you seem to like aerial photography, is getting another one if you can, and going out to those ring cities and taking some beautiful photography and sharing it with obviously with your friends and family. You know, that we're people here just like there are people there, and we only want what's best for our kids just like they want what's best for their kids. It's just unfortunate that we're stuck in this you versus us, black versus white type of situation that's happening right now.
And I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any doubt that that you cannot ever go back to the United States? You know, if you fly back to the US, the moment you open your mouth, they will throw you in jail, and you'll be that girl who joined the NRA for 2 years waiting trial.
That one, back there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, I'm not an American citizen. I don't
Especially.
I don't
There is some freedom of speech for Americans, but you're a foreigner, and if you go to US, make a conference, you won't go back to hotel. You'll go FBI, на тебе попадет в beer.
Well, I mean, I'm just
warning you.
Yeah, no, I know. I believe you. I don't have any plans of traveling there. But based on what's been happening, I'm sure that it's probably not the best of ideas to do so. But I guess we will see. We'll see how things turn out. But as far as
and I wanted to say something that works to break through the information blockade and hysteria. I shared some of the videos because you do that instinctively. Just ask questions. When you ask questions and you provoke thinking, this question, maybe if not answer, it's gonna stick and work in the head of people who heard it. And at this point of people not listening, is almost the only way to get something across is to present a question. Like in this time, the mathematicians, they would send each other challenges. So a question is like a challenge. And if you want to help somebody think and see the truth, then the best way, in my opinion, at this point of not listening to each other, is to ask a question. And but most people will cover their ears and don't want to have. For example, when you in your video when you answered to Arnold Schwarzenegger, I bet I have no idea. I bet if you watch the analytics of that video and watch time, you will see a drop in the moment we start to list the name of those kids, because people will go and can't hear this.
I'll take a look at the stats. I'll check
later. But there are some other videos which ask the question, we ask many questions, and one of these is going to get through. And most people have the intellect to process these questions. They just don't have the goodwill to do that. So,
well, Benoit, usually in my conversations, I have an open floor time where you can say whatever you want, whatever comes to mind, maybe your closing statement in this conversation. Please go ahead. You can do so now.
Well, I'm a compositor. I write electronic music, ambient music. I tried not to have politics sneak in my music, but I couldn't, because it invited itself. I lost a good friend on arguing about this in music, and so it invited itself. So now I made a statement on a website, which is on www.transcendenterie.ninja. You can put the link in text later. And it's just a short statement, and then to close this talk. And now my music I'm playing with two Russian musicians, one bass guitar girl and one guy who was expert playing synthesizers. And we understand now that it's important that we make music that to support people, to support the morale of people and the emotion and emotional health of people. And I'm not gonna take weapon and play war. It's not my job. Now I want to focus on making good music and making music that helps people feel supported and connected. And ultimately, an effort of peace, but not peace at any cost. I'm not a pacifist. I know that this is necessary. But like you, I want the conflict to have a resolution and to bring stability in the region. And that NATO finally understands to stop playing with fire and stop provoking Russia. Because they're only hurting themselves in the end,
Oh,
the countries of NATO.
couldn't agree with you more. Benoit, merci beaucoup pour la conversation. Vraiment, merci.
Avec plaisir.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation. It's great to know that there are people like you exist who can show the truth, who can document it, who try to provoke thought with questions, and to get people to realize that not everything is black and white, as it may seem, or as they're told that it is. So everyone, the link to his YouTube channel and other social media, if necessary, is going to be in the description below. Please put a thumbs up or a thumbs down, write your comments. I'm sure Benoit is going to be reading the comments as well. And thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for staying till the very end. Subscribe to his channel. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like. And have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Benoit.